And it's time for another installment of Martial Law. This program intended for informational purposes only. The information does not constitute legal advice. The law is constantly changing, and the information may not be complete or correct depending on the date and your particular legal problem. Each legal problem depends on its individual facts, and different jurisdictions have different laws and regulations. Because of that, you should not act or rely on any information in this segment without seeking the advice of a competent attorney licensed to practice law in your jurisdiction for your particular problem. Guy like, for instance, Marshall Chriswell, who joins us this morning here on Indiana in the Morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, Todd. How are you this morning?
Terrific.
Good.
All right, so here we go. Some information a couple of weeks ago on if you are buying a house, some things that you need to know, some tips. What about for those who are selling a home? What are the things that they need to know? I'm sure that there are plenty of things that maybe they need to check off their list, right?
Sure. There's a long list, and I've got a few in the top of my mind that we can discuss. And some of these, it'll depend a little bit on whether what type of property it is. Is it your home? Is it a rental property? Is it another commercial property? Is it vacant land? That changes the scenario a little bit in some respects. And also, are you listing the property with a realtor, or are you attempting to sell the property yourself, or do you already have an agreement? Do you have a buyer that approached you or that you knew wanted to buy the property? So those kinds of things can change the scenario a little bit, but I've got some good general information for everybody.
Well, there's obviously a lot that you can do to improve the property, but those are things that you're thinking are just going to help the resale value. We're talking more here about things that legally you need to take care of, correct?
That's right. And so if you're thinking about selling a piece of property, you want to, number one, make sure that you own it. And that sounds pretty simple, right? It's mine, I'm going to sell it. But I encounter situations on a regular basis where someone, even goes as far as signing a sales agreement to agreeing to convey real estate, and come to find out that they don't own it. And those situations take various forms. One common situation is that the owner of the property is deceased, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of siblings a month or so ago. They signed a sales agreement to sell some vacant land here in Indiana County. Got the sales agreement all in place. They had a cash buyer. Closing date was set for about 3 weeks from the date of the sale of the signing of the contract. So everybody is ready to get this done. The buyer's chomping at the bit, and I get this file and I take a look at it, and the first thing I see is this property is titled to their mother, who has been dead for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the siblings, of course, said, well, we thought since she had passed that we could just go ahead and sell it. And, that's not the case, that we needed them. Of course, I needed to put the brakes on this deal and get an estate open for their mother, and we had to deal with inheritance tax and all these kinds of things. So that's one common situation. Another would be if you have an ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, joint owner of the property, a sibling, somebody, and they have passed away, or they are just no longer involved with the property, but their name is still on the title.
Mm-hmm.
That can be another situation where I want to sell this land, but I don't own it, or I don't own a 100% interest in it.
Yeah, and that would seem very, very obvious, but you're right. There are probably a lot of people just not aware, and they've maybe never even just followed through. Mother or father are the last of their previous generation to pass away, and they figure, well, it's mine now, and nothing is done legally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's right. Or properties that are owned by a business entity, right? You are an owner of an LLC or a part owner of an LLC or a corporation, and this property is owned by the by that entity. So do you have the, number one, do you have the signing authority? Do the corporate documents give you the signing authority to sign a deed, a sales agreement, those kinds of things?
Mm-hmm.
And also, do the terms of, your bylaws or your operating agreement of your LLC, do they permit you to sell that? And are there other people that are entitled to sale proceeds?
Okay, so that's one of the things that we want to put on our checklist. What's the next thing?
The next one is disclosure. Pennsylvania law requires that a buyer disclose deficiencies at the property that they're aware of, or that they reasonably should be aware of, and that you disclose these things to potential buyers. So, you want to think about this. Number one, if you are, whenever you're listing the property, whether you're listing it yourself, you see if you're on Facebook now, you see people list real estate all the time, and they just kind of write a general paragraph, about, what the features are of the property, how many bedrooms and bathrooms, and other important items regarding the property. So if you're listing it yourself, where you're posting it, what information you're putting out there, or what information are you giving to a realtor to place a listing, and that's where disclosure starts, right? You want to make sure that you're not fraudulently stating anything about the property that may not be true, or may be an exaggeration, or you're stating something that may mislead someone to believe that there's not a deficiency when there is. And then also there is a seller's disclosure form. Everybody's got to sign. Everybody's got to fill out. Every seller, if it's residential real estate, up to 4 residential units. So if it's an apartment building with 3-4 units, you still got to do that, even if you don't necessarily live there. So you've got to fill out this seller's disclosure form, and you've got to be very careful in reading that. I've dealt with multiple lawsuits where people just filled that form out wrong because they didn't read carefully. And what you get is the buyer relies on what's in there when they purchase the property, and then if they end up having that the buyer realizes it, or say it's related to water infiltration, something like that, and then they end up having a flood, and they say, well, you should have disclosed to us that you had water in the basement 3 years ago, and all of a sudden you've got a lawsuit. So, disclosing deficiencies and being very honest and upfront about that is really important.
It's interesting you said that, because I was just thinking, what about if are we talking here about somebody who has a well that is really good in the spring and the fall, but in the summertime it dries up? Would that be one of those disclosures?
It would be, and I've dealt with that situation as well. Yep, there are things that looking at the property when it's as I was just mentioning with water infiltration. Well, if it hasn't rained in a month, unless you have a property inspector out there, really poking around, you may never know that the property floods. Same with a well, like you said, the water flow and pressure might be great when they test it in March. What happens in August?
Okay. All right. So those are 2 big scenarios that are on our checklist of things if we're selling a property. Are there others?
There are. Sounds another one that sounds simple, but for some reason people can't seem to get it right. Have a written sales agreement. If you have a realtor, this is going to be taken care of. That's a big part of their job. If you don't, if you're selling by owner, get a lawyer involved early. Get a sales agreement in place that is written. If it, under Pennsylvania law, there's a statute. It's called the Statute of Frauds. Very old law in Pennsylvania that says basically, if you don't have a written contract for the sale of real estate, then the agreement is not enforceable. You can't have an oral contract to sell real estate. So you've got to have a written agreement, and you've got to sometimes you get these written agreements from folks, and it's a scribbled piece of paper that says, I'm going to sell you this property for this amount, and everybody signs it. You've got to have some meat on the bone with respect to, when is this going to close? Is this going to be a cash deal? Is there going to be a mortgage? What types of property inspections are we looking at? All kinds of things that have to be considered whenever you're putting together a sales agreement.
All right, yeah. And you're right. Those are things that we say to ourselves. Well, that's obvious, but if you don't follow through and follow through completely, and that really goes back to what you said in the beginning. Get yourself an attorney right away.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's if particularly if you're not engaging the services of a realtor, which, like I said, many people these days at least try for a period of time to sell property on their own before they incur the cost of a realtor. Now, I highly recommend finding an experienced real estate agent to list the property. You're going to get more for your money, and those you get more value out of it. But if you're not going to do that, at the very least, get an attorney involved early. We can have all those documents ready to go when you do find that buyer, and make sure that all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
All right, not a lot of time left this morning with Marshall Chriswell, and I'm sure there are quite a few other items that are on this checklist that we're coming up with this morning. What's the next biggest thing?
If you're selling a rental property, and I do this a lot. I deal a lot with real estate investors that have rentals. If you're selling a rental property, make sure to know what the terms of your lease are. Have a written lease. Okay, again, written agreements are important. Have written leases with your tenants. Know what the terms of those are. Usually, if they were drafted by a lawyer, you've got a good lease. It's going to address what happens if you sell the property and what kind of notice you have to give to the tenants. If you have tenants that are in violation of the lease, are behind on the rent, if you have problem tenants, if you're thinking about listing the property, this is the time to deal with those issues. Either get those tenants into compliance, or begin the eviction process if that's what's necessary, because it's harder to sell property that has problem tenants or tenants that are behind in the rent and things like that. So that's important, and make sure you've got all your security deposits. Make sure you realize, okay, I've got to have that cash and transfer it to the new owner whenever we close.
All right. So those are a lot of things that we need to consider, and I'm sure there are more that if you talk to an attorney, they're going to fill you in on all of them. So, Marshall, you are that attorney that we're talking with this morning. If someone wants to talk to you about all these things, what should they do?
Sure, for those real estate questions or estates, probate, family law, the kinds of issues that I deal with, you can always give me a call, 724-465-5826. Come and see us in the R&P Cole Building, 655 Church Street in Indiana, or go online, send us a message at www.westernpalawyer.com.
Thanks, Marshall.
Hey, thanks a lot, Todd. Take care.
You too.